My lead source tonight is the reporter at the center of this story, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, Jeffrey Goldberg. And it's great to have you here tonight. I want to start by getting your reaction to what we heard from Secretary Hegseth there, saying that nobody was texting war plans. Given you were privy to this group chat, is that how you saw it?
No, that's a lie. He was texting war plans. He was texting attack plans. When targets were going to be targeted, how they were going to be targeted, who was at the targets, when the next sequence of attacks were happening. I didn't publish this, and I continue not to publish it because it felt like it was too confidential, too technical, and I worry, honestly, that sharing that kind of information in public could endanger American military personnel. But no, they were plans for the attack. They were texted before the attack. And
there were things texted that you viewed as so sensitive, you did not even publish them in your report today.
I made the decision that the technical aspects of this, including what kinds of weapons packages, the attack sequencing, and so on, that's not necessarily in the public interest. What's in the public interest is that they were running a war plan on a messaging app and didn't even know who was invited into the conversation. I mean, it's an obvious, ridiculous security breach, and he if you notice, he didn't actually answer the question.
But his attempt at a denial also stood out to me because no one that I talked to at the White House today argued this or tried to say these were, misconstrued or altered, or this is not real. I mean, the National Security Council confirmed the veracity of it.
Yeah, the National Security Council, I asked various officials, including Pete Hegseth this morning, for comment. And the first question I had for everyone, is this real? I wanted to make sure, obviously, before we go public, and say, are you sure that this is not a disinformation campaign run by a foreign state, a non-state actor of some sort, trying to target a journalist for reasons I couldn't explain? And they're like, no, this is apparently a real channel, and I appreciate them telling the truth about that, and we published.
Did they seem alarmed when you reached out for comment?
Probably is not the happiest day that they experienced in the White House so far, but they were professional about it.
I thought that as you were kind of walking through when this began, you weren't even sure if it was real yourself. You thought maybe I'm being spun or conned or something's happening here.
Until the day that I received the attack plan from Pete Hegseth at 11:44 a.m. that Saturday, March 15th, and then saw the attack plan said that 1:45 p.m. Eastern time, that the first bombs would be dropping in Yemen. Until that moment, until that period elapsed, the 2-hour period between that text and the first bombs being dropped, I thought it was a hoax. I thought somebody was trying to entrap me. Again, could it have been a foreign intelligence service? Could it have been a gadfly organization that tries to entrap journalists, which we know happens? I didn't know what it was or who it was, but what I did know was that the obvious answer was that this is a real conversation of the national security leadership of the United States. Seemed improbable to me because why would they do it on Signal? Why would they do this on a messaging app? And why would they invite the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic to watch?
And how many people were on this chat?
18.
And did any of them at any point when you were included in here ever raise that question, why are we talking about this over Signal?
No, nobody raised the question, why are we talking about this over Signal? And nobody said, hey, who is JG? Because you show up in a little bubble as your initials. And no one at any point said, who's JG? And when I withdrew from the group, you formally remove yourself. You hit a button. It says JG has removed himself from the group. I assumed that somebody would say, hey, who just removed himself from the group? Nothing.
You didn't hear from Mike Waltz or anyone else after that?
No, nothing at all. I mean, it's a level of incuriosity. I guess that's the polite way of saying it. It's a level of recklessness that I have not seen in many years of reporting on national security issues.
And so you eventually remove yourself from the chat.
Right, once I was sure that it was real.
But after you've seen everything, I mean, you published these messages.
Well, I don't know what I haven't seen since then, but yes, I removed myself and I started writing the story.
That's
in
fair.
order to expose the security breach.
And some White House reporters today were saying maybe I would have never removed myself from that.
These are tough questions, but I can't go into it, all the decision making involved in this. But I found out what I needed to find out. A, that it was real, and B, that it did represent the kind of gap, the Mack truck-sized gap in their security that I could never have imagined a White House experiencing.
I mean, because you're a reporter, and probably a worse nightmare to have someone included on a chat, but a foreign adversary or someone who wanted to do real harm to the United States, I think that's the concern that is so obvious.
Look, I say this only half jokingly. I mean, I'm sitting in a Safeway parking lot watching my phone and realizing, oh my God, this might be real. I think Pete Hegseth just sent this group actual targeting information, actual sequencing of an attack. And I'm holding on to the phone. I don't want anybody to. And then I thought to myself, well, I mean, I guess they're lucky they didn't send this to a Houthi by mistake, or to a foreign diplomat, or to somebody who would plausibly be in one of their phones. I guess that counts as a kind of luck. That's why they're not supposed to use open source, privately owned messaging services. They're supposed to keep all those conversations on what they call the high side. That's the classified side, where only government officials who are cleared to talk about this stuff get to talk about it. That's why they have that.
You typically can't even download Signal to a classified device that they issue at the Pentagon,
Right.
For example. Was there anyone in the group chat who surprised you that you were wondering why would they be included in this conversation?
Well, it was an interesting chat. It wasn't just CIA or intelligence officials, not just defense officials. The Secretary of State was there, the Secretary of Treasury was there, the White House Chief of Staff was there, White House political aides like Stephen Miller, I believe, was there. It was a pretty broad group, given that the level that it was at. It was just a kind of an all-encompassing coordination group for a specific action. I would say, to answer your question, I've been surprised by most aspects of this story since I first got invited into the Signal chat.
I mean, what have you heard today? I mean, I was getting blown up about this, messages of people saying that they couldn't believe what they were reading in your piece. What did you hear from people today? That
they couldn't believe what they were hearing in the piece. I mean, like I said, I mean, I'm very interested, obviously, in what the professionals say about this, professional reporters who cover these issues like I have, people who have been in government, it's a combination of extreme bad luck. How could you possibly invite the editor of The Atlantic into your chat? What are the chances of that? And also just real anxiety and anger, both about the sloppiness. Remember, American service people were involved directly in this attack. It wasn't just standoff weapons fired from 1,000 miles away. But you can't just put out this kind of information and hope for the best. The other piece that people are upset about, and there's a lot of military people feel this way, is like, hey, we have guidelines about how we're supposed to handle sensitive information. We have to pass tests every year on this. We get punished if we leave something on a desk. We get punished if we don't put it in a safe. What's going to happen here? These guys are just chatting. They're sitting, on the weekends in their homes, at stores, at restaurants, on their phones, and what's going to happen? They're wondering if there's a couple of, a double standard.
Well, what did you make of the argument that, which we keep hearing from officials, this revealed the thoughtful and deliberative process that they went through? Because there was disagreement over how to proceed, which I want to ask you about in a moment. But what did you make of that, saying this actually just reveals how this process works?
It does. I mean, that was part of the interesting part of the reporting for me, was that, oh, wow, we just found out that J.D. Vance really disagrees with the president on this particular issue. J.D. Vance made a compelling argument Other people countered the argument. What was really interesting was that the person designated SM, which I took to be Stephen Miller, shut down that conversation. He said, I heard the president say we're doing this, and we're doing this, and that was the end of the conversation.
For those who haven't read the story, which everyone should, the vice president's disagreement, you said, was clear with moving forward on the strike, because you quoted him as saying, I'm not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. There's a further risk that we see a moderate to severe spike in oil prices. I'm willing to support the consensus of the team and keep these concerns to myself, but he was arguing for delaying these strikes.
Yeah, well, what's interesting is that he's saying that he would keep those concerns to himself, but he's basically just told the entire cabinet that he disagrees with the president's decision, and not only that, that he doesn't think the president understands. That's pretty heavy. Doesn't think the president understands the consequences and ramifications. That was very revealing and interesting. I would say, yes, I found the policy dialogue very, very interesting to read. And you could see the different strains of thought in this administration. Ultimately, they came into line and they launched the attack.
The president responded today by pointing to the success of the attack and bashing the Atlantic. The reporter didn't cite you specifically. He may not have known at that point that it was you who was included. I think that might change his reaction just based on how he's responded in the past. What was your reaction to that?
I found it interesting, and I want to look at the timeline, but I find it interesting that I believe that was early in the afternoon. I alerted the White House shortly after 9 in the morning, and that was emails and texts and calls to Mike Waltz, Stephen Miller, Susie Wiles, and so on. I found it interesting, and again, I want to figure this out. The president said he didn't know, 3 or 4 hours later. That struck me as noteworthy and worth more exploration.
Who do you think they meant to add instead of you? Have you figured that out?
I have not.
I've been searching JG all day on the White House website.
Maybe Jeff Goldblum. I think there is somebody in Washington right now who finally understands why he wasn't or she wasn't included in this conversation that they should have been included in. I don't know. I mean, it could have been a mistyped name. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody with the initials JG. I don't know. I've also heard speculation that they wanted me in this conversation in order to show how thoughtful and tough they are on Yemen. My response to that is there are easier ways to let me know, which is just call me and tell me.
Yeah, that's 3D chess. I'm not sure that's
5D chess. Yeah.
Jeffrey Goldberg, I mean, it was the story of the day. Thank you for joining to talk about it. Really appreciate that.